It's news time. Information is power. Be current. The news headline. Football Kenya Federation President steps aside after fraud charges. Nick Mwendewa was stepped aside as the president of Football Kenya Federation (FKF) after being charged with multiple counts of fraud. In a letter to FKF's National Executive Committee members, Mwendewa stated that the handing over the reins to Vice President Doris Petra because he felt personally targeted by his arrest and the subsequent charges which he denies. In light of the frequent arrests and detentions which have adversely affected my family and personal businesses, and whilst I am confident I will be cleared of any wrongdoing in the end, I have asked my Vice President, Madam Doris Petra, to assume all functions of the FKF President, Mwendewa wrote. My decision has been arrived at with the Federation's best interest at heart. On Monday, Mwendewa pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of fraud at an anti-corruption court in Nairobi, having been rearrested by police on Friday. The total amount of money Mwendewa and others who were not present in court are accused of taking from FKF is about 38 million naira Kenyan shillings. Mwendewa, who had been head of the FKF since 2016, is currently out on a cash bail of 10 million Kenyan shillings as he awaits trial. The case against Mwendewa comes while a government-appointed caretaker committee continues to run football in Kenya. Sports Minister Amina Mohammed took the decision last month, stating that the FKF had failed to account for all monies allocated to it by the government. Among the terms of his bail, Mwendewa has been instructed to deposit his passport with the court and is forbidden from accessing FKF offices. The week's court appearances come a fortnight after Mwendewa was released on bail after a previous arrest. And last Thursday, the FKF announced the case against him and was over, and the court returned its cash bail of 4 million Kenyan shillings, but the Kenyan police later clarified that it was not the fraud case which had been closed. It meant that the country's Directorate of Criminal Investigations, DCI, continued its investigation and eventually arrested him for a second time, with Mwendewa then being formally charged with corruption, and the source from BBC. This also goes in line with the rearrest of Fani Kayode of the APC, which was defected to the APC actually, about some fraud as well. A former aviation minister, Femi Fani Kayode, was on Tuesday reinvited by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, following investigations into alleged document falsification. Fani Kayode, alongside a former Minister of State for Finance, Nemadi Usman, is standing trial on alleged 4.6 billion naira money laundering before Justice Mohammed Aikawa. Other defendants are Yusuf Danjuma, a former chairman of the Association of Local Governments of Nigeria, ALGON, and the company Joint Trust Dimensions Nigeria Limited. They are facing a 17-count charge of money laundering preferred against them by the Anti-Graft Agency. They had each pleaded not guilty to the charges and were granted bail. The trial had begun before Justice Aikawa. Witnesses were being led in evidence until Aikawa was transferred out of Lagos Division. The charge was consequently reassigned to a new judge, Justice Daniel Osaigo, and the defendants were rescheduled for rearrangement on October 27. Meanwhile, at the last adjourned date, Fani Kayode was absent from court, and the defense counsel who appeared on his behalf, Mr. Fred Ajua, informed the court that he was on admission at Kubwa General Hospital in Abuja. He had prayed for an adjournment on that grounds on behalf of the second defendant, but the EFCC prosecutor, Mrs. Bilikisu Buhari, informed the court that the same tactics had also always been adopted by the defendant whenever he does not want to attend the court. After going through the court record, Justice Osiago noted that it was clear that the defendant had issued a similar excuse 5 times. The court had consequently ordered the defendant to be present in court on the next date without fail. The court also ordered him to pay a fine of 200,000 in addition. When the matter came up yesterday, all the defendants were present. Counsel to second, third, and fourth defendants Morrison Kwaka's son and Clement Onwenuwo also announced their appearance. The first defendant counsel, Chief Ferdinand Obi, was absent following a letter to that effect. The prosecutor, Mr. Rotimi Oyedepo, did not oppose the letter of the first defendant counsel. Oyedepo, however, informed the court that the prosecution was glad that the court had figured out from its record that the second defendant, Fani Kayode, had sought repeated excuses from the court. He told the court that the prosecution had recently discovered that all letters sent by Fani Kayode was fake. At this point, the court stopped the prosecutor on the grounds that it was a matter of urgency ought to thrash out before the court acted on letters to grant an adjournment. Osiago said that having granted an adjournment on the letters, the court had become functus officio. In response, Oyedepo told the court that the agency was currently working on the report and will do the needful. A drama, however, unfolded after the case was adjourned until January 24. While Fani Kayode was still at the corridor of the court, an EFCC investigator, Mr. Shuaibu, walked up to him alongside the prosecutor, and after some tete-a-tete, the defendant entered his vehicle and followed the EFCC operatives to their office. The operatives, who confirmed the arrest to journalists, said that at the time of filing this report, Fani Kayode was in their custody on quiz over the false documentations. In the charge, the defendants were alleged to have committed the offences between January and March 15. In counts 1 to 7, they were alleged to have unlawfully retained over 3.8 billion naira, which they reasonably ought to have been formed part of the proceeds of an unlawful act of stealing and corruption. In counts 8 to 14, the defendants were alleged to have unlawfully used 970 million naira, which they reasonably ought to known formed part of an unlawful act of corruption. Meanwhile, in count 15 to 17, Fani Kayode and one Olubode Oke, who is said to be at large, were alleged to have made cash payments of about 30 million naira in excess of the amount allowed by law, without going through a financial institution. Besides, Fani Kayode was alleged to have made payments to one paste poster CO PPC of number 125 Lewis Street, Lagos, in excess of amounts allowed by law. All offences were said to have contravened the provisions of Sector 15, Subsection 3, 416(2)(b) and 16(5) of Money Laundering Prohibition Amendment Act 2012, and therefore Femi Fani Kayode had actually been rearrested so as to know in details the full information as from his end. Interested in whom is to take over from him in 2023, for which they pretentiously worship him like God just to gain favor. The Tinubus who brought restructuring to the manifesto of APC has not spoken because they fear that if they do, they will not be allowed to contest for the presidency of the country come 2023, for which his party, the APC, faced with stiff opposition for not implementing their promised restructuring program. So, the party's national executive, including the President Muhammadu Buhari, decided to set up a committee under the chairmanship of Nasir El-Rufai